Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Today is my distinct pleasure to introduce a man who is recognized.
The battle of evolution is only one skirmish in a much larger war.
Science simply makes no use of the hypothesis of God.
Ask yourself, what has intelligent design given us? Nothing.
We cannot accept intelligent design as an alternative scientific theory.
They will never accept that we have a better argument. They just pester us and they waste our time.
Civil rights, to how to rule your life in 10 easy steps. Today, Ben is speaking on the topic that has become increasingly important to him over recent years. While Ben has always been an ardent supporter of science, lately he has noticed an alarming trend in the scientific establishment that could have dire consequences for every American. Without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome for Mr. Ben Stein.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, gangsters. Thank you very, very much. Freedom is the essence of America. We're talking about freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom from fear, freedom of religion. Martin Luther King said, America is essentially a dream, and he said it is a dream of freedom and equality, and freedom is the way to equality. And America simply would not be America without freedom. In every turning point in our history, the decision has always been about freedom.
Freedom is what makes this country great. Freedom has allowed us to create, to explore, to overcome every challenge we have faced as a nation. But imagine if these freedoms were taken away. Where would we be? What would we lose? Well, unfortunately, I no longer need to imagine. It's happening. We are losing our freedom in one of the most important sectors of society, science. I have always assumed that scientists were free to ask any question, to pursue any line of inquiry without fear of reprisal. But recently, I've been alarmed to discover that this is not the case. It all began when I met evolutionary biologist Richard Sternberg in Washington, D.C. His life was nearly ruined when he strayed from the party line while serving as editor of a scientific journal affiliated with the prestigious Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. Your office was over there?
That's correct. This here is the West Wing. Directly ahead of us is the West Wing of the Natural History Museum.
So now you're not there anymore because you're a bad boy.
No, I'm not. No, I was exiled.
You're a bad boy. You questioned the powers that be. What was Dr. Sternberg's crime? He dared to publish an article by Dr. Stephen Meyer, one of the leading lights of the intelligent design movement. The paper ignited a firestorm of controversy merely because it suggested intelligent design might be able to explain how life began. As a result, Dr. Sternberg lost his office, his political and religious beliefs were investigated, and he was pressured to resign.
The questioning of Darwinism was a bridge too far for many. The mentioning of intelligent design that occurs at the end of the paper was over the top. And I think the intelligent design proponents have raised a number of very important questions.
And you wanted to get those questions brought up and discussed.
Placed on the table.
Placed on the table.
People were so upset about it. They were so upset that you could see they had a physical, emotional reaction.
Wow.
They were saying that Stephen C. Meyer is a well-known Christian, that Stephen C. Meyer is an intelligent design proponent, that Stephen C. Meyer is a Republican. It was all couched in terms of religion, politics, and sociology. the way the chair of the department put it is that I was viewed as an intellectual terrorist.
Terrorist.
Because of giving the topic of intelligent design some modicum of credibility.
What happened to Dr. Sternberg was terrible, but surely it was just an isolated case. I was still pretty skeptical, so naturally I checked in with the head of the Skeptics Society, Michael Shermer.
So I can't prove there is no God or Yahweh in your case, any more than I can prove there is no Isis, Zeus, Apollo, Brahma, Ganesha, Mithras, Allah, or for that matter, the flying spaghetti monster. And think about just one thing. Why would the aliens look like this?
Well,
these are
who drew
bipedal.
that? Who drew that?
Skepticism, it's not a position you take. It's just an approach to claims.
So this one is called the borderlands of science, where sense meets nonsense. Is intelligent design nonsense?
Well, it's unproven. So in that sense, it's nonsense. So I would put it in the sort of shaded areas between good, solid science and total nonsense. You know, it's sort of 3/4 of the way toward the nonsense side.
But you think, nevertheless, people should be allowed to speak about it and publish papers about it?
They are free to write and publish and be heard in public forums and go to conferences just like everybody else does.
Well, what if a person published something, say at the Smithsonian, in favor of intelligent design and then lost his job over it? And it had been peer-reviewed, and published, and then he lost his job over it anyway. What would happen? What do you think about that situation?
I think that particular situation, there was something else going on.
What was going on?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know, because I don't know, but I think there had to be something. People don't get fired over something like that. You roll up your sleeves, you get to work, you do the research, you get your grants, you get your data, you publish, and you work your butt off, and that's how you get your theories taught.
Well, but wait a minute. What if you try and roll up your sleeves and go to work and work your butt off, and they say, well, we're going to fire you if you even mention the word intelligent design?
I don't think that's happening. Where is that happening?
George Mason University. Throughout its 50-year history, our mission has remained clear: to prepare a diverse population of students to think and to grow in a climate of unbridled academic freedom.
After Dr. Caroline Crocker simply mentioned intelligent design in her cell biology class at George Mason University, her promising academic career came to an abrupt end.
My supervisor invited me into his office. He said, "I'm going to have to discipline you for teaching creationism." And I said, I mentioned intelligent design on a couple of slides, but I did not teach creationism. He said, "Nonetheless, you have to be disciplined." At the end of the semester, I lost my job.
Not only did this well-loved professor lose her job at George Mason, she suddenly found herself blacklisted, unable to find a job anywhere.
So whenever I interviewed for a job, I would be offered it, usually on the spot. Since this has happened, and since people can Google my name, I'm finding that when I send my credentials, I do get interviews. I get many interviews, but I never get offered a job. I don't tell them about my science sin. I was only trying to teach what the university stands for, which is academic freedom.
There's nothing to be learned in neurosurgery by assuming an accidental origin for the parts of the brain that we work on.
It wasn't just biologists who were feeling the Darwinist wrath. When neurosurgeon Michael Egnor wrote an essay to high school students saying doctors didn't need to study evolution in order to practice medicine, the Darwinists were quick to try and exterminate this new threat.
A lot of people on a lot of blogs called me unprintable names that were printed. There are a lot of very, very nasty comments. Other people suggested that people call the university I work at and suggested perhaps it's time for me to retire. I realized when I kind of went public with my doubts about the adequacy of Darwin's theory that I would encounter criticism. What has amazed me is the viciousness and the sort of baseness of it.
I'm an old guy. I have tenure. I'm academically safe. But the young people and what is happening to them in America right now because of this scientism gulag is really terrible.
Apparently, Professor Marks was not as safe as he thought. A few months after this interview, Baylor University shut down his research website and forced him to return grant money once they discovered a link between his work and intelligent design.
In order to attract grants, you have to market yourself. So you put up sites and call yourself labs and groups and things like that in order to get visibility. And in my entire experience in academia, I never went to any superior and asked them any permission to put up any of these labs. So the fact that this was singled out, let alone shut down, is jaw-dropping. It's astonishing. I have never been treated like this in my about 30 years in academia.
Shut up, you freak! I said shut up! It's a man!
If you peel back the onion, I think that there is no doubt that the center of this is my work in what some would call intelligent design.
People really get emotional about this. Whenever you say intelligent design in a room of academics, them's fighting words.
Creationists. Astronomer Guillermo Gonzalez found himself in a fierce shootout with Iowa State University following the publication of his book, arguing that the universe is intelligently designed. Despite a stellar research record that has led to the discovery of several planets, his application for tenure was denied, putting his career in jeopardy.
I worried about my tenure a little bit in 2005 when the petition was being circulated because I viewed that as a strategy of Hector Avalos and his associates to try to poison the atmosphere on campus against me because he knew I wasn't tenured yet and I was very vulnerable. I have little doubt that I would have tenure now if I hadn't done any professional work on intelligent design.
Dr. Gonzalez had this advice for scientists who might be thinking about following his example.
If they value their careers, they should keep quiet about their intelligent design views.
We know there are times and places to be quiet, and other times and places when we can make noise if we want to.
Will you show us?
Of course. Boys and girls, how would you like to show some of the ways we know of being quiet?
It's the kind of thing where you just learn to keep your mouth shut.
In addition to those scientists who were willing to appear on camera, we encountered many more who didn't dare show their face for fear of losing their jobs.
You use an intelligent design perspective to get the research done, but you're not allowed to talk about it in public.
And so there is definitely incentive, if you think about it, for people to remain within the mainstream.
You know, what's he up to? What is he thinking? Is he one of them? That kind of thing.
If I write intelligent design, they hear creationism. They hear religious right. They hear theocracy.
So it appears Mr. Shermer, the self-styled skeptic, was wrong on this one. Intelligent design was being suppressed in a systematic and ruthless fashion. But maybe intelligent design should be suppressed. I didn't like what was happening to these scientists, but on the other hand, we don't want our kids being taught that the Earth is flat or that the Holocaust never happened. It was time to ask the scientific establishment what was so bad about intelligent design.
Intelligent design people are not genuine scientists.
Intelligent design is a racket.
It's just propaganda.
The only intelligent thing about it is to have got people to call it that.
It's really very stupid as well. Everybody knows science education in America is appalling. What we don't need at this time is intelligent design in the classrooms.
To present intelligent design stunts their educational growth. It stunts their intellectual growth.
But what I don't understand is how these animals could have been on Earth millions of years before man. And the Bible says the whole Earth was created in only 6 days.
It wasn't just the educational aspects of intelligent design that had scientists concerned. Many suspected the movement masked a much larger agenda.
Intelligent design is a set of excuses to squeeze creationism into the classrooms.
Get intelligent design in the schools today, and we can have school prayers tomorrow.
Any other complaints?
Can you imagine anything more boring? The boredom attached to ID is supreme. It is so boring that I can't even bother to think about it much anymore. It's just utterly boring.
Love is in the air, everywhere I look around. Love is in the air, every sight and every sound.
Love was in the air, all right, but none of it was directed toward intelligent design. There seemed to be a lot to hate about ID, and nearly all of that hatred was focused on one place.
The people from the Discovery Institute, the people who are doing the intelligent design, they're all varnish and no product.
The Discovery Institute is a propaganda mill. It's an institution designed to suck in money from religious investors and turn it into a sanitized, somewhat secular version of the creation story to get it into the schools.
If they have a way of understanding nature that's superior to the one that we all are making lots of discoveries using, great. Bring it on.
We are really, really lost. I think it's on 3rd. I think it's on 3rd. I think it's down there. I have no idea where this place is. I guess I just keep walking. Do you have any idea where the Discovery Institute is? Have you ever heard of that? Never heard of it. Okay, thank you. How are you, sir? Good, yourself? Good. Do you have any idea where the Discovery Institute is?
Institute, not a clue. Discovery Institute.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to offer.
Welcome to Seattle.
Thank you, sir. It's got to be this whole building. Yes, where is the Discovery Institute, please, sir?
Discovery Institute, the main floor, suite 808.
Okay, very good. Aha! Success at last. Aha! We found you. Are you Bruce Chapman?
I am.
How are you? I'm Ben Stein.
Well,
very kind of you to have me here.
Well, I'm delighted to meet you.
Can I look around and see your office?
Absolutely.
Do you just have this floor, or do you have several other floors as well?
No, this is it.
This is it? You've made an awful lot of trouble for being in such a small office. I thought it was going to be like the Pentagon.
We're like the little boy that said the emperor has no clothes. And he didn't have a big organization either.
When you go around and raise funds, your people are not saying to you, by the way, we're going to get all these scientists out of the classroom and put Christ back in the classroom.
Well, I don't know that Christ has ever been in the science classroom. This is not a religious argument. This is something that people, we have fellows who are Jewish or agnostic or various other things. There are people, there are Muslim scientists. There are people of all kinds of backgrounds who agree that Darwin's theory has failed. And so why would you bring religion into it? You don't need religion. This is a red herring, Ben. People who don't have an argument are reduced to throwing sand in your eyes.
Well, if the Discovery Institute could get its wish about this subject, what would your wish be?
Well, on this subject, as on others, we'd like people to be able to have a robust dialogue and even a debate where the evidence, the best evidence, in this case, the best scientific evidence is made available to people.
Well, surely no one questions there should be a debate.
Oh, yes, they do.
They do?
They say the debate has been settled.
Well,
that the issue's
when
settled.
was the debate settled?
Ben, I'd like you to talk to the scientists. You don't want to get your science from me.
Mr. Chapman claimed ID had nothing to do with religion. So why was my first stop Biola University, formerly known as the Bible Institute of Los Angeles?
Your own personal Jesus. Someone to hear your prayers, someone who cares.
Footnote in the history of science.
Your
inference that
own
Stonehenge was caused by intelligence.
personal Jesus.
Remarkably stable in terms of all the knowledge.
Someone to hear your prayers, someone who's there.
How much money have you ever gotten from Jerry Falwell?
$0.
How about Pat Robertson?
0.
Are you a minister?
No.
Are you a priest?
No.
Pastor?
No.
Youth pastor?
Oh, I did teach Sunday school once.
Has this all been resolved? I mean, aren't we all Darwinists now? Except for a few cranks like you?
Well, it's a funny thing that questions that aren't properly answered don't go away. This question is loaded with all kinds of political baggage, but one-on-one at a scientific meeting after the third or fourth beer, my experience has been that many evolutionary biologists will say, yeah, this theory's got a lot of problems.
So you're meaning to tell me that there really is a debate among scientists about whether or not evolution occurred?
Well, evolution is a kind of funny word. It depends on how one defines it. If it means simply change over time, even the most rock-ribbed fundamentalist knows that the history of the Earth has changed, that there's been change over time. If you define evolution precisely, though, to mean the common descent of all life on Earth from a single ancestor via undirected mutation and natural selection, that's textbook definition of neo-Darwinism, biologists of the first rank have real questions.
But the modern theory of intelligent design is just microwaved creationism.
I don't think that's the case. Creationism, properly understood, begins with the Bible and says, how can I fit the Bible into the data of science? Intelligent design doesn't do that. Intelligent design is the study of patterns in nature that are best explained as a result of intelligence.
So intelligent designers believe that God is the designer?
Not necessarily. Intelligent design is a minimal commitment scientifically to the possibility of detecting intelligent causation.
Dr. Nelson didn't sound like a crazy person, but I still suspected ID was nothing but reheated creationism. My next stop didn't seem like it was going to alleviate those fears.
I didn't crawl out of the ocean, I didn't come from no monkey. Science tends to forget evolution's just a theory. They present it in the textbooks and on animal TV. Like it's fact, but tell me, were you there 12 million BC?
Evolution is from an intelligent design perspective, is perfectly acceptable if the sense is that how did the design get implemented? The issue is there real design there, and are these material mechanisms like natural selection, are these adequate to account for everything we see in biology? And our argument is no, it's not.
But Darwin produced all this evidence from his travels and his studies at the Galapagos that evolution explained things.
If you look at the history of science, people often have a good idea and then they decide just to run with it. And they say, we're going to apply this everywhere. And so Darwin takes his idea of natural selection and says, I'm going to explain all of life with it. I mean, physics used to be Newtonian physics. Newton was physics. And then we got to look to Einstein, general relativity. It's not, Newton isn't enough. Well, I think likewise what we're finding with Darwin is that he had some valid insights, but it's not the whole picture.
Okay, Darwinism may not be the complete picture, but what made these guys think they had the missing pieces? I put this question to Dr. Stephen Meyer, author of the paper that originally got Dr. Sternberg in so much trouble. It's hard to believe that this little town is the headquarters of giant Microsoft. It's enabled Mr. Gates to become fantastically rich. Maybe that's what Steve Meyer's doing. Maybe this is somehow going to make him fantastically rich. We'll pin him down like a butterfly on a butterfly board. Butterfly on a killing board. Coffee shop straight ahead. Newton is buried in the geniuses corner at Westminster Abbey, right?
That's correct, yeah. Darwin is also buried in Westminster Abbey.
Right, and so is Darwin. Right near each other, right? And you're here in Redmond in a little building without a sign. Right? And you're obviously an incredibly smart guy, but how dare you challenge someone who's buried in the geniuses corner next to Newton at Westminster Abbey?
Well, it may seem a little cheeky, but it's what scientists are supposed to do. When I was in Cambridge, one of my supervisors often advised us to beware the sound of one hand clapping, which was a way of saying if there's an argument on one side, there's bound to be an argument on the other. And what I found in studying the structure of the argument in The Origin of Species is that for every evidence-based argument for one of Darwin's two key propositions, there is an evidence-based counter-argument.
Well, but is it a debate? I mean, there's just you and a couple of other guys in a dinky little office downtown, say on one side, and there's the faculties of all the great universities of the world on the other side.
Speaking with a great uniform and authoritative voice.
Right.
Yeah. Well, in any case, the debate really isn't going to be settled by numbers. It's going to be settled by the evidence and the arguments.
While I was still in Bill Gates country, Dr. Meyer recommended I check in with molecular biologist Jonathan Wells. What kind of names do they call you?
Creationist.
What do you say back to them when they say you're a creationist?
Well, I usually don't get the opportunity.
What's at stake for you personally here?
First of all, I love science. I think the way Darwinism corrupts the evidence, distorts the evidence, is bad for science.
Well, the other scientists would tell you to just shut up if you love science, okay? Because you're sort of being a bomb thrower into science.
I am upsetting the apple cart, and I think it deserves to be upset in this case.
Why?
Because the evidence is being distorted to prop up a theory that I think doesn't fit it.
Was Darwinism really that bad? Perhaps a change of scenery would give me a fresh perspective.
Quand je t'ai vu au coin de la rue, tout est vide, j'ai cru que tous les deux, sous le ciel bleu, nous serions très heureux.
Mr. Berlinski, I assume?
Mr. Stein.
How are you, sir? So where are you from originally?
I was born in New York.
Yes.
Spent 31 years in Manhattan.
Yes.
And I spent a lot of time in California, too.
And tell me all the various universities where you studied or taught.
No, I was at Princeton, then I had a professorship at Stanford, and then I left Stanford, and I taught at Rutgers. I left Rutgers, and I taught at the City College in New York. I left the City College of New York. I taught at the Baruch College. I taught at San Jose.
What did you teach at Baruch College?
Anything they wanted. Come on in.
Thank you, monsieur. What an old building, wow.
It's the oldest in Paris.
You're kidding. Merci, monsieur.
Ah, je vous en prie, monsieur.
Merci. Wow, this is fabulous.
Let's put it this way. Before you can ask, is Darwinian theory correct or not, you have to ask the preliminary question, is it clear enough so that it could be correct? That's a very different question. One of my prevailing doctrines about Darwinian theory is, man, that thing is just a mess. It's like looking into a room full of smoke. Nothing in the theory is precisely, clearly, carefully defined or delineated. It lacks all of the rigor one expects from mathematical physics, and mathematical physics lacks all of the rigor one expects from mathematics. So we're talking about a gradual descent down the level of intelligibility until we reach evolutionary biology. We don't even know what a species is, for heaven's sakes.
So his theory is smoke, but elegant smoke.
There's a certain elegance to it, but, you know, I think Einstein had the appropriate remark. He preferred to leave elegance to his tailor.
A room full of smoke? That certainly wasn't what I was hearing from prominent Darwinists like Richard Dawkins.
Evolution is a fact. It's a fact which is established as securely as essentially any other fact that we have in science.
Richard Dawkins is so confident that evolution is a fact and that therefore God doesn't exist that he has devoted his entire life to spreading the evolution gospel.
I'm an atheist with respect to the Judeo-Christian God because there is not a shred of evidence in favor of the Judeo-Christian God. It is completely right to say that since the evidence for evolution is so absolutely, totally overwhelming, nobody who looks at it could possibly doubt that if they were sane and not stupid. So the only remaining possibility is that they're ignorant, and most people who don't believe in evolution are indeed ignorant.
But the people I spoke with weren't ignorant. They were highly credentialed scientists. So there had to be something else going on here. So you think the whole theory of evolution is false, or just certain parts of it?
Well, again, evolution is a slippery word. I would say minor changes within species happen. But Darwin didn't write a book called How Existing Species Change Over Time. He wrote a book called The Origin of Species. He purported to show how this same process leads to new species, in fact, every species. And the evidence for that grand claim is, in my opinion, almost totally lacking.
How does Darwin or Darwinism say life began?
Well, he didn't know, and in fact, nobody knows. So Darwinism, strictly defined, starts after the origin of life and deals only with living things.
Well, how can there be a theory about life without a theory about how life began?
Well, a grand overarching evolutionary story, of course, does include the origin of life, but Darwin's theory doesn't begin until you have the first cell.
Well, does someone have a theory about how life began?
This is the story of a small planet in space called Earth.
For a typical Darwinian explanation of how life originated, Dr. Wells directed me toward this documentary.
The chemical elements essential for life, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and nitrogen, were now in place. What was needed was a way of combining them. Perhaps the energy came from lightning. Whatever it was.
Excuse me?
Whatever it was, energy managed to arrange these chemical ingredients in just the right way.
Whatever it was? I was hoping for something a little more scientific. The most popular idea has been that life emerged spontaneously from primordial soup. In 1953, Stanley Miller mixed water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen to simulate the early Earth's atmosphere. Then he ran electricity through it in an attempt to jumpstart life. It didn't work. While the initial results seemed promising, 50 years later, most serious scientists have abandoned this approach in favor of alternate theories. Prominent Darwinist Michael Ruse attempted to explain one of them to me. He wasn't kidding. How did we get from an inorganic world to the world of the cell?
Well, one popular theory is that it might have started off on the backs of crystals.
My crystal ball.
Molecules piggybacked on the back of crystals forming, and that this led to more and more complex. But of course, the nice thing about crystals is every now and then you get mistakes, mutations, and that this opens the way for natural selection.
But at one point there was not a living thing.
Yeah.
And then there was a living thing. How did that happen?
Well, this is I've just told you. And I don't see any reason why you shouldn't go from very simple to more and more complex to more and more complex.
I don't either, but I don't know how you get from mud to a living cell. That's my question.
Yes, well, I've told you.
I think it was on the
try
back
one
of
more
crystals.
time.
On the backs of crystals.
On the backs of crystals is at least one hypothesis, yes.
So that's your theory, and you think that is more likely and less far-fetched than intelligent design?
I think it is.
I wouldn't put Ben Stein's money on Dr. Ruse's joyriding crystals, but it did make me wonder, what were the chances of life arising on its own?
It's been speculated that probably there would have to be a minimum of about 250 proteins to provide minimal life function. If that's really true, then I think it's almost inconceivable that life could have happened in some simple step-by-step way.
Okay, so the simplest form of life requires at least 250 proteins to function. What's so difficult about that?
Welcome to the Casino of Life. Who wants to spin for a chance to win?
Oh, sure. I'll give it a shot. What do I win?
Take a look at this.
Huh? How about the world's first single-cell organism? This perfectly aligned string of proteins could be yours.
Now, take a spin.
I won.
Tina, tell him how many times he needs to do that to win the prize.
250.
That's right, folks, and all in the correct order.
But that's impossible.
We've heard that before, haven't we, Richard?
Come on, Mother Nature, do your thing. You stupid machine! I hate you!
We're talking about something that's staggeringly improbable, roughly 1 in a trillion, 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 trillion.
Let all of life choose a million, a trillion, a trillion, trillion. The number is essentially zero. Something has to skew nature to choose the ones that work.
So, in the game of life, it looks as if the house always wins. Luckily, some serious scientific minds have figured out a way to beat the odds.
Directed panspermia.
When faced with the overwhelming problem of the origin of life, Nobel Prize winner Francis Crick proposed this theory, that life was seeded on Earth, which basically means aliens did it. Crystals? Aliens? I thought we were talking about science, not science fiction.
We don't know what caused life to arise. Did it arise by a purely undirected process? Or did it arise by some kind of intelligent guidance or design? And the rules of science are being applied to actually foreclose one of the two possible answers to that very fundamental and basic and important question.
So the rules of science say we will consider any possibility except one that is guided.
Exactly.
No matter how life began, on the backs of crystals or in the test tube of some intelligent designer, everyone agrees it started with a single cell. But what is a cell? Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Darwin wrote The Origin of Species in 1859, published it in 1859. He had an idea of the cell as being quite simple, correct?
Yeah, everybody did.
Okay. If he thought of the cell as being a Buick, what is the cell now in terms of its complexity by comparison?
A galaxy.
If Darwin thought a cell was, say, a mud hut, what do we now know that a cell is?
More complicated than a Saturn V.
So what is in a cell as far as we know now?
A world that Darwin never could have imagined.
I needed someone who could give me a glimpse into this world. So we went to molecular biologist Doug Axe.
Think of a cell as being a nanofactory, a factory where, on a very small scale, digital instructions are being used to make the components of the factory. Here we have the famous DNA double helix. You can see the two helical strands that are intertwined and wind around each other on the outside of the molecule. This is the material that stores all of our genetic information. In higher life forms, this will be the equivalent of something like a gigabyte of information stored in the molecules that form the individual chromosomes, all packed within the nucleus, which is a tiny fraction of the entire cell size. So what does DNA do? Well, the information in DNA ends up providing the information for sequencing the amino acids to make protein. We have information in a one-dimensional form that provides the information for a three-dimensional form.
I'm finally just beginning to grasp the complexity of the cell. Are there systems within the cell that go well beyond Darwinian evolution? Some type of cellular technology that drives adaptation, replication, quality control, and repair? What if these new mechanisms have massive design implications? Well, I say, so be it.
The cell really is like nothing we've ever seen in the physical world. That's got to be firmly grasped. That's not something we can just say, oh, well, it's just a little bit more of the same old, same old. It's not the same old, same old.
We are finding is that there's information that's in the cell that cannot be accounted for in terms of these undirected material causes. So
It has to be.
And so there's some other, so there has to be an information source.
So one of the key questions faced by modern biology is, where do you get information from?
Well, Darwin assumed that the increase in information comes from natural selection. But natural selection reduces genetic information, and we know this from all the genetic population studies that we have.
And where does the new genetic information going to come from?
Well, that's the big question.
So when we find information in the DNA molecule, the most likely explanation is that it too had an intelligent source.
I mean, we need engineering principles to understand these systems, okay? I mean, it's only because of our advancements in nanotechnology that we can even begin to appreciate these systems.
But using intelligent design didn't seem to stop the scientists I spoke with, so why all the controversy?
Suppose we find, simply as a matter of fact, that our scientific inquiries point in one direction.
Which is that there is an intelligent creator.
Why should we eliminate that from discussion? Streng verboten? How come? Why?
Streng verboten. Very good. What does streng verboten mean? Strongly forbidden.
Strongly forbidden.
You've got two possible hypotheses. You've got a wall through the middle of through your brain, in effect, through your thinking. You say, well, you can't consider anything on this side of the wall. Only hypotheses on this side of the wall are permissible for consideration.
What about academic freedom? I mean, can't we just talk about this?
Their reply is that science is not a democratic process.
Oh, really?
And that there is a consensus view.
But wait a minute,
we are to subscribe to the
wait a second, but
view.
Darwin challenged the consensus view, and that's how we got Darwinism. If Darwin wanted to challenge the consensus today, how would he do it? Science isn't a hobby for rich aristocrats anymore. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if you want a piece of the pie, you've got to be a good comrade.
Scientific ideas. How we get them to you, the people. Every idea must be inspected to ensure that it is safe. All theories must pass through a series of checkpoints. First, the Academy.
Getting a controversial theory through the Academy can be dangerous. Few people know this better than Congressman Mark Souder. He uncovered a targeted campaign led by individuals within the Smithsonian and the National Center for Science Education to destroy Dr. Sternberg's credibility.
If you want peer reviews, if you want to be published, if you want to go to respected institutions, the core view does not tolerate dissent. There's kind of a, this is the way it is, and anybody who's a dissenter should be squashed.
Are you gonna be on my side if I let you up?
Sure, Chick, sure. I'm on your side. Just let me up. I'll do anything you say.
Souder isn't the only one who has witnessed the Academy's tactics. Journalist Larry Witham has seen similar behavior during his 25 years of covering the evolution controversy.
Once you're thick in science, you can't question the paradigm. But if you want to get grants, if you want to be elected to high positions, if you want to get awards as a promoter of public education of science, you can't question the paradigm.
People cannot be trusted to form their own opinions. This business about open-mindedness is nonsense.
Why is the scientific establishment so afraid of free speech?
There is this fear that if one aspect of the theory is closely scrutinized, there's going to be an unraveling.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
I interviewed dozens and dozens of scientists, and when they're amongst each other or talking to a journalist who they trust, they'll speak about, it's incredibly complex, or molecular biology is in a crisis. But publicly, they can't say that.
Keeping a keen eye on the Academy, our various watchdog organizations.
Listen to Eugenie Scott of the National Center for Science Education. The NCSE has been at the heart of virtually every evolution controversy over the past 25 years, vigorously defending the Darwinian gospel.
We have had a lot of business, unfortunately, at NCSE in the last few years, because virtually every state in which science education standards has come up for consideration has had a big fight about the coverage of evolution in them. NCSE was started by a group of scientists and teachers who were very concerned because in the late 70s and early 80s there were a lot of attempts to pass equal time for creation science and evolution laws. And clearly this is something that neither scientists nor teachers liked. It wasn't exactly help the creationists are coming, but it's kind of along those lines. Most scientists just throw up their hands and say, creationists, they drive me crazy, you handle it. And we've worked a lot with science education organizations. The most important group we work with is members of the faith community, because the best kept secret in this controversy is that Catholics and mainstream Protestants are okay on evolution.
Are you sure about that, Eugenie?
Liberal Christians have been fighting with conservative Christians for so long that they'll side with anybody against the fundamentalists. And Eugenie Scott says, well, welcome over.
There's a kind of science defense lobby, or an evolution defense lobby in particular. They are mostly atheists, but they are desperately wanting to be friendly to mainstream, sensible religious people. And the way you do that is to tell them that there's no incompatibility between science and religion.
But is there really an incompatibility? Can't we believe in God and Darwin?
Implicit in most evolutionary theory is that either there's no God or God can't have any role in it. So naturally, as many evolutionists will say, it's the strongest engine for atheism.